Absolutely.
How often do you remember after having such a storm right away? They
Yeah.
say another inch, 1 inch.
Today, 1 inch?
1 inch. I think they'll say it'll stop by 10, maybe.
That's not
Yeah,
so bad.
yeah, that's what somebody told me. Okay,
Yeah, it says less than an inch. I didn't know. Anyway,
okay, okay. We are on mem base number base. We are on 42.2.1. We just started the Mishnah yesterday, where the Mishnah stated. By the way, Mark, before we get into the point of the Mishnah, we connected to the Mishnah. Maybe we'll just say the point of the Mishnah. The Mishnah states that if you have a pot that was cooked and you removed it and it's boiling, you can't put spices into that pot, right? Because that pot that the Mishnah states that was the Kli Rishon, it's the first utensil, and therefore, if it's boiling, if the water is still boiling, if you put spices into it, it will cook the spices. However, avol noten hu, the Mishnah says now on a bed, noten hu l'toch. You could add spices to hot food if the hot food is no longer in the original pot that it was cooked in, but you pour the contents of the pot into a bowl, into a ka'ara, like a plate, but they'll translate it into a bowl, or l'toch tamchoy. A tamchoy is like a big bowl when you pour the total contents of the pot into it. So that's much more. You might have thought perhaps that's more like the pot itself. The whole pot went into all the contents of the pot went into the tamchui. So that's called the kli sheni. And a kli sheni, the Mishnah is stating over here, when it comes to spices, kli sheni will not cook the spices. Now, we stated, we're going to see when you come, I want to show you something interesting. But we stated that might not be true for all foods. There are certain foods that are easy to cook, and we'll have a problem with the cliche. But tavlin spices, we've seen on record. We have three things that we've seen on record. This is the third item that we've seen that cliche a second utensil will not cook is spices. We've seen water, right? We had Beit Hillel, the water. You can put cold water to hot into cold, as long as the second vessel. It doesn't make a difference. Beit Hillel says. So water is not cold easily to cook. Water will not cook in a second vessel. And we also had earlier about oil. That also, klisheni, a second utensil will not cook it. So those are three things on record that klisheni won't cook. Now, yesterday you mentioned the notes from the art scroll about what about if you put a salad in. What about if the pot is made out of um, if the contents are not liquid, the contents of the pot is a solid. Would we say the same? Morning, Adam. Boker Tov. Would we say the same thing for if the contents of the kli sheni is not a liquid, but rather a solid? So you saw the art scroll stated that many authorities rule, and we spoke about that where I said, in my house we have a separate plate. If the liver or the onions are raw, if they're being served with the cholent, I don't want people to cook. I'm concerned about the liver going together with the hot boiling cholent. Um, now, so so what do we say? So some people you might use a separate plate for that. Even now, but I saw in the Yalkut Yosef that the Yalkut Yosef actually he holds that there's no difference between, according to the, I mean, maybe he'll say that it's a nice thing to be strict, but he technically holds that the same way Kli Sheni will not cook when it comes to because wherever we say klisheni won't cook, we should say the same thing, even even if it's not even if it's a solid in the pot. That see, he brings down in Siman Shin Yud Chet Nun Dalet. Some say that even though a klisheni, a second utensil, won't cook, that's only if it's talking about a liquid. Meaning, if you place a liquid in a pot, and then because then we say the walls of the walls of the pot will cool down the liquid a certain amount, and won't cook what you place into it. But something which is dry that doesn't have liquid, like say rice, if you put the rice into a bowl or pieces of meat into a bowl or fish or hot fish, they would have the status of a kli rishon. As long as it's boiling, as long as this item that you place inside that your hand would recoil. So if you put the cholent, the meat, if you put the hot fish, then we would say that would have a status of a kli rishon, and you can't put something raw into that. Other
but not water or oil, water
oil,
doesn't.
water, and spices. No, but we'll say we're going to be. There are those that are strict and say that it does not have a status. That pot that bowl that you poured the rice into is not. It does not have a status. Does not have the protection, so to speak, or the allowance of a klisheni. Meaning
Right,
the
but what prevails? The idea of easy to cook, hard to cook, or the clean?
right. So you're saying Rabbi, anyways, klisheni, we're concerned. Klisheni will cook most items we're concerned,
No,
but
the opposite. The opposite. I'm
you
saying if water and oil are hard
come
to cook, who cares if it's a clean rishon?
very good because we say because a kli rishon they do cook, meaning water will cook in a kli rishon. The same way you put water on a fire, that's the kli you put into it. If you put water into a pot that's on a fire, so if you
Right, it will cook.
take water into a pot that's off the fire, since it's the
Oh,
original pot, so that
mhm.
it will cook. Therefore, you can't add water to your soup pot, the big pot of soup. When you took the big pot of soup off the fire and it's not on the fire, and you say, it's very hot. I want to have the soup. So to pour water directly into the original pot that the soup
Yeah,
was
that
cooked.
means I can't put oil onto fish. I can put olive oil on fish when you take it out of the pot
We're,
on the serving plate.
we're saying now, if the bowl that it's in has a status of a even though it's a cliche, according to this point, even though it's a cliche, and by cliche we say it will not cook a spice, right? It will not cook oil, right? So let's say you say like oil, but if you have in that cliche, you have rice in that cliche, or you have something else, what you had fish in that cliche, and now you want to add to that fish. You want to add any item to that fish. You want to add a raw lemon, let's say, to that fish. You want to add a something that's raw to that fish, right? So again, let's not use the example of raw lemon, right? Let's use your example. You want to add water to the fish. You want to add something or oil to the fish that generally does not get cooked, but through a cliche. But in this type of cliche, since the cliche, good morning, Asaf, since the cliche is a solid, so it does not, we will treat it like a kli rishon. So a kli rishon, you can't put, morning, Asaf, you can't put water, you can't put oil, you can't put spices. You could put water, oil, and spice in a cliche, but this cliche does not have the ticket,
Status.
the status of a cliche because it's a solid and the walls did not cool it off properly. That is the opinion, some opinions. And however, there are those that do not make a distinction whether it is if the cliche has in it a solid or a liquid. The same way, if it has a liquid, the cliche, the second utensil, will not cook the spices, the water, or the spices, the water, or the oil. So too, if it's a cliche, if it's a bowl, I don't care that you have rice or a salad in that bowl. That bowl morning will cool off what even the solid that's in that, and therefore you could put the oil, the water, the spices if you want into it. It has the status of a cliche. And now that is now and the Alkad Yosef, he takes the position that there's no difference whether the bowl has in it, the cliche has a liquid in it, has a solid in it, it will not cook the item that you the water, the oil, or the spices. And therefore, he says you can pour a cold liquid, or a soupy. He says, let's say, marak sonain, sounds like a watery, some sort of liquidy type of food into the hot rice that's still boiling hot, but since it was transferred into the bowl, the hot rice is not in it's not in the original pot that it was cooked in. Or you could place that gravy, right? Take cold gravy. Can I pour cold gravy? It's what it sounds like to me, meaning that it's liquid. He's treating it. Sounds like he's treating it like like liquid, and you can go ahead and pour that liquid, meaning that it's like water, onto the piece of meat that's boiling, since the meat is in a kli sheni. Now, that seems to be his. The thing with I mean, he says Merak Sonain. You see, the question is, he uses the example. I mean, the logic, if you say klisheni is not mavashel, you see, we are, see, he gives the example. What are you going to pour into, what are you going to pour into into the rice? What are you pour into the piece of meat? You're not going to put water onto it. But let's say you have gravy. And the gravy, or you have some sort of soupy thing, that the gravy already is cold. And we have a rule that by a liquid, we're concerned for cooking after cooking, right? That's why on Shabbat you don't take a liquid, you don't take a soup that's already cooked from the refrigerator and put it onto the plata, put it onto the warmer, or put it onto, because we're strict. You take a salad, dry salad that was already cooked, not a dry liquid that was already cooked, because we're strict by a liquid, and we say we're concerned that it could be that be a problem of recooking. However, this liquid, even though we will not put a liquid onto the warmer, but we could put the liquid onto this boiling hot piece of meat, even though the pot of meat, even while it's in a cliche, since it's in a second utensil, you could pour that gravy that's cold onto that piece of meat, or because that would be or into the rice, because since it's in a cliche. Okay. You see what I mean? The logic would also be whether, even if it's not a gravy which was once cooked, if you say cliche second utensil doesn't cook, even if it was something that was never cooked at all, you would be able to pour onto it. That's according to the Yalkut Yosef, that he does not, that he said he holds there's no difference. Mark, you hear that? So that's an interesting thing, that he holds there's no difference, between whether it's a solid or a liquid. Once it's in a klisheni, whatever that you know on record that the klisheni won't cook, will be no difference whether the klisheni has liquid in it, or the klisheni has solid in it. There won't be any difference. In the language of the Chafetz Chaim, his language is the following: if in the klisheni for the Ashkenazi world, if it's placed in a klisheni as a solid, let's say a davakush, some that's boiling, you should be careful, because there are poskim that hold that it has the status of a kli rishon, and he quotes in the Banetz of Mogan Avraham. So he's not saying, he's saying we are on 42b1. So that is the opinion of the Chafetz Chaim. Now, I presume Rav Yosef would also say you want to be strict and you want to be careful. You want, I don't know why he didn't say over here Tavel bracha. You should get a bracha, because there are opinions that say it's a problem if it was a solid in the klisheni, and you're pouring into the cliche and you're putting water or the Yalkut say, okay, it's okay if it's a klisheni, it doesn't make a difference if it's water or a solid in the klisheni. You could place your liquid. Right, exactly. But I would say not whatever you want. Why? Because remember, there are certain things that have a status of a klisheni that you can't put in. The only three things on record that you could put in klisheni, we said, is what Adam: water, oil, and spices. Everything else, in your honor, Mark, I want to look at the art scroll 42b1. 42b1, note 8. In the second paragraph, you want to read it? Our Mishnah and Gemara have focused on spice and salt. You got it? Well, wait a second. Again, our Mishnah. No, go to the next paragraph, Mark. Our
Focus on spices and salt. And I thought that these may serve as a liquid in a secondary vessel. Also learn above that it is permitted to warm water or oil by placing it on a secondary vessel. There are, however, certain foods that cook readily, like eggs. That's my example.
Yeah, it's your example. How do you like
Which
that?
may therefore be not placed even in a liquid in the secondary vessel, so long as the hand recoils from it. So if your hand doesn't recoil, you could put the egg on there.
Right.
Since we do not know with certainty which foods cook readily and which do not, it's customary not to add any uncooked food on a secondary vessel when the hand recoils from it. The only exceptions to the rule are spices, water, and oil, which are known not to cook in secondary vessels. Mishnah Berurah, once the hot liquid
Transferred
is
to a
transferred
third vessel.
third vessel, aka the teacup,
Right.
is treated
Less
less
than.
stringent.
And that's where there are those, that's where we have that allowance of the, with the tea bag. This is what you were looking for remember you asked, we spoke about it, but here, it's all, it's all right. But we got it from really our Gemara, but this is based on our Gemara.
Only thing you could add freely is water, oil, and spice.
To a cliche name. Right. And
any food like lemon or lettuce or raw onions or liver or anything raw.
stay away from a cliche name. If it's recoiling, it's boiling.
If it's not recoiling, it's like warm food.
No problem. Right.
In the cliche.
Correct.
I can put a salad on top of my chicken and rice. It's not so hot.
Exactly. It's not boiling.
What?
Practical. That's the practical application of that. Okay. because this is all based on our Gemara beforehand. We had a Gemara beforehand, if certain things, certain foods like fish or certain things, by just pouring hot water on it does the trick. We saw, or certain things we saw that's called, you made it, even though it's not, even though it might not have been a kli, it might be a cliche or whatever the case. We saw this sort of concept of easy to cook. That's what we saw earlier. Okay, let's
Does
get.
it matter if the water oil?
Again, the water oil, you could add cold water to hot water, to hot food, hot liquid. Remember, cold, what we're saying, even the three that are exceptions to the rule, you only can able, according to the Sfardim, it doesn't make a difference. You can add it to a solid or to a liquid. But to the Ashkenazim, they would only be able to add those three things to a liquid. We are strict. We're not going to put that. We're not going to put that tomato. We're not going to put the tomato into a cliche. Again, anyways, we want to a clean anyways. We want to put a liquid. We want to put a liquid into a kli sheni, even though which type of liquid? If the kli sheni is a solid, we won't put a liquid into it. Right? That would be because if it's not if the kli sheni.
Does it matter that temperature, the stuff is hot?
Yeah.
In other words, let's say I have boiling water. It's already boiling.
Boiling water. So you pour from the tea kettle boiling water into a bowl, right? Directly from a tea kettle.
Piece of meat. It's a little dry. So you know what? If I put a little water in it, it will absorb, make it better. I have the hot boiling tea kettle. Can I take the hot water? I'm not cooking this water anymore. I put it on the stick.
Then what if you're not cooking? It would sound. We would say it shouldn't be a problem. What should be the problem? I'm not cooking anything. It's already cooked. The water's cooked. The water's hot. I don't see technically a problem. Steak was cooked. Everything's cooked. Everything is cooked. I'm not cooking anything. Doesn't sound like there's a cooking issue here.
You're improving the steak. That's all.
Okay, yeah, but it's not. But it doesn't seem like a problem.
You would do that. That's correct.
It would sound like it. I could ask about it. Doesn't sound like there should be a stringency in that. The question is, does it look like cooking in any sense? It's already cooked. Everything's cooked. Yeah, right.
You don't put spices, food in the dry food in the plate.
We wouldn't put spices on a cliche knee. Right.
Take the food out of the thing. You put it in your plate. Don't put spices.
Right. But if you put it into a cliche, then you should be able to put the spices. Right. Right.
The plate itself.
Meaning. No, a bowl.
Oh, yeah. That's third. As long as you get to the third somehow. But if you went straight to the eating plate, that would have been second.
Right.
Okay.
But you see, Adam, you bring up a good point. A flat plate and a bowl. I mean, a flat plate. There's no walls to cool off the top. Meaning meaning again, if when we say the walls, it's if you have a bowl. Now let's think about this. If you have I'm saying the plate. I'm saying the walls of a plate is flat. So if you go ahead and you take boiling hot stuff, something, and you put it onto a flat plate. So now I'm just thinking about this. No one brought this up yet, but if we're talking about the walls of the pot, right? Adam is bringing the walls of the pot. Of course, if you deal with a bowl, so you could say that. But what about a plate, a flat plate? What would we say about a flat plate? Would we say it has the status of a cliche and it wouldn't cook if it wouldn't cook the water, it wouldn't cook the oil, or that you place into this flat plate? See, if you're Ashkenazi, so the only thing you're really putting in, you have to be putting it, it's a liquid. When we say kli sheni won't cook, it's if it's in a liquid kli sheni won't. So you're always putting it into a bowl, always dealing with a bowl, a liquid, and it's always in a bowl. You don't put liquid generally into a
Isn't a plate considered?
I would say yes for the bottom. Whatever's on the bottom, I would say yes. The bottom is cooled off from the. But I'm wondering about take a boiling hot piece of fish from the pot and let's say you put it onto the flat plate or boiling hot piece of chicken, and now that the top of that chicken was never nothing. It didn't come in contact with anything that cools off that top of the chicken, right? If we're
Bowl
saying
doesn't cool off the top of the chicken either.
right, see,
And by the way, is every plate has
I understand, but I'm saying, but there's a lot of the. I'm saying it's less cooled off. I would say that if flat, the bottom, the top of, if you're dealing with a solid, right? We're saying the Sardim are lenient according to the Yalkut Yosef, that if you put a solid into, you could put water or spices or oil onto a salad. Into Kli Sheni is a salad, right? And the second utensil you have a salad, you have cholent, right? Which is you could put the liquid into that. But my question is, if the logic is that the second utensil, the walls, part of the main logic is the walls of the utensil cool the thing down a certain amount. So you're saying even in a bowl, how much is coming in contact with, but there's at least there's more.
liquid goes much.
Right. It's the whole.
I put a piece of meat in the bowl, only the bottom.
It's a good point.
Same.
You think it's the same as the plate? Okay, so you see that it's a big.
Unless you say chilled is more like sauce and more. It's not liquid, but it has where you could put it in the bowl and you could fill a bowl with it and it would fill, you get to the sides. You take it with a ladle and put it, it's gonna fill the sides. You put a piece of chicken, the breast of the chicken on the bowl, nothing.
Doesn't feel anything.
Either the steak.
Right.
or-
So you see why it's a big
That's why the solid becomes chicken.
right. And you see, so it's a big leniency that the Sfardim would have for those three, to put that spice on that solid that's in a secondary vessel, even though it's still boiling hot.
So you hold water, oil, and spices okay? Raw food, not okay.
We would hold water, spices, and oil, excuse me,
On a solid.
on a into a liquid in a bowl that contains liquid.
Solid, what do you hold? You can put squeeze it in. Nothing?
Salad. You wouldn't meaning in general. Let's remember, Mark. Good morning. A cliché, if it's not those three things, even though it's a cliché of a liquid, which is the best cliché, I can't put anything. The only three things I can put into a cliché are those three things. Only if it meets our standards of cliché. If it doesn't meet the standard, meaning everything,
So yours liquid, you put those things. Solid, you don't put anything in it.
we don't put
Cliche.
we don't put anything. Yeah, we don't put
You
any.
don't put water, oil, or spice.
We don't put water, oil, or spice in a cliché. So therefore, we put nothing. And if the cliché is a solid, we put 0 items in a cliché.
That-
If the cliché is a liquid, we put 3 things: water, spices, and oil. That would be for the. So that's why Rabbi Feinstein told me, or David Feinstein told me of blessed memory, just always use a kli shlishi. Like just make it simple. See, I think also,
In most cases, you do option that, because your wife serves it in a serving platter, and then you take it from the serving platter into your platter, that's the
right. So therefore, usually you're good. Usually you're good. But the question also we have to see is, we have something called irui, pouring, meaning we have something called we have something called kli rishon. We can't put something into the kli rishon, into the first utensil. And let's say we said the second utensil, we said you could put the water over. What about if I'm pouring from the first utensil onto onto um, onto something? Let's say I'm pouring water onto a spice. I'm not putting the spice into the original pot. I can put the spice onto a kli sheni, into a second utensil. I can't put the spice into the first utensil that came off the fire, right? The utensil came, I put the pot came off the fire, is on the counter, morning. I can't put the spice in there. I could, but if I take from the counter, I put it into a bowl, I can put the spice into that bowl, right? Right? I can put, let's say, right, I'm saying the same way when it comes to tea, you see, how do we make the tea, right? We make the tea by kli shlishi. But what's called the kli shlishi? We put in the tea bag only after it's in the second utensil, right? Then it becomes a kli shlishi. The second utensil, right, is the third utensil. I mean, when I made second cup, which is the third utensil. But what about pouring? We don't say you can't put the tea bag into into the kli.
That's what you just said. You could put spices in the sheni and put boiling water. You can do it.
You can't put the spices again. Spices in the kli sheni. If I put spices in a bowl, in an empty bowl, can I pour hot water onto the spices? No. Why not? Not good. Why not? I have to first, but if I pour the water into the bowl first, then I could put the spices in.
No. That's like putting a tea bag into the kli sheni.
But remember, Mark, there's a difference in spices and tea bag.
So you're saying tea is
First.
cooked like water and oil?
No, tea bag. We say.
I mean spices.
Right. Right. Spices are one of the three exceptions, right? Spices, oil, and water are the three exceptions. But tea bag falls under the category of items that might easily cook, and therefore I can't put the tea bag in the kli sheni. And but then there's another point. So now I put the tea bag in the kli shlishi. But what comes in first? The water into the kli shlishi, or the tea bag into the kli shlishi? The water. Because we want the walls to work before you put in that bag. So therefore, make sure you get the water into the kli shlishi, then put the bag.
So go back to what you're talking about for. This is for.
No, yes, I'm saying that's why we treat the pouring like the original. When you pour from the first utensil, it's like the first utensil itself. The same way you can't put the spice into the same way you can't put the spice into the pot that's off the fire. You can't pour the contents of that pot onto the spice.
So the same thing you're saying now with the spice and the pour the water. You have to pour the water for the sheni,
And then
add the spice. You can't put the spice in the bottom of the cup and then pour
exactly. That's what I want to point out. Tosfos points that out. And that's what that's the halacha says. The pouring from the pouring of the first utensil has the status of the first utensil itself. Okay, first utensil is like it's like putting in this first utensil.
If it's not
Right. If the same way you can't go ahead and put the spice into the pot that's off the fire, you can't pour the spice. Exactly.
Pour it, add the spice.
Exactly. Have a great day, everybody. We're getting